Welcome to the 1% Doctor Podcast. What separates the good from the great, the standard from the extraordinary? It's not just skill, it's not just knowledge, it's mindset, it's execution, it's the relentless pursuit of growth. And that's exactly what we talk about here on the 1% Doctor Podcast. I'm Adam Lamb. I'm your host. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome back to the 1% Life Doctor Podcast. My name's Adam Lamb. I'm your host. Today we have a really just exciting and interesting guest. A man that's probably been more places behind the scenes than anyone else I know. And so I'm excited for him to share his story with you today and some just the latest and greatest stuff that he's working on. Truly revolutionary stuff. So listen, we're going to go into that stuff at the end, but let's start out and get Dr. James Stoxen here. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a guest today. I'm grateful and honored to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's an honor to be here.
So, we like to ask every guest, when was that moment in your life when you decided that you wanted to get into the medical space? Was there an aha moment, or, give us the background on that?
Well, I was playing rugby when I was in college. I got recruited by a couple of big guys I used to hang around with, and we were in Santa Monica, and I was a hook, and the hook is in the middle of the scrum, and you're literally lifted off the ground by two props that lift you up from one side and the other side, and you're actually not touching the ground, using your foot to hook the ball into the scrum, and you don't even have control of where your body is because they are like holding you up, like like propping you up. And you've got another team of 8 guys and 8 guys behind you and 8 guys, huge guys in front of you. So you're in the middle of that. And it was a slippery day because it rained 4 days in a row, and it was about this much water in the center of the field. The scrum collapsed. I went head first, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to break my neck for sure. And I went head first into the mud and broke 3 ribs, right between the shoulder blades, where it just doesn't feel real good. The wind's knocked out of you and you're just thinking you're going to die. And I got pulled out, and, you had to wash the mud off, and went to the sideline. As a chiropractor, he just said, "Hey man, let me help you out." And I said, "Great." And so he really did help me. And unfortunately, I did live with, quite a bit of pain, because when you breathe, the ribs open up and then close, and, it's like, and I wanted to keep lifting weights. So it just was difficult to heal, because you can't, cast a rib,
Yeah.
because
A
it's
rib's one
broken
of the
inside.
worst for people that have never had a rib issue. Like, it's just pain that you just have to deal with until it's
And
done.
so I called my father and I said, "Hey, you know what? I want to be a chiropractor." He said, "Listen, we'll support you 100%." And within a year, I was at National College. And I graduated and I was 24 years old. And so pretty young for a licensed physician in Illinois, but I was pretty happy. Got out in 3 1/3 years instead of 5. I went to summer school, and it's been a dream ever since. I'm super passionate about what I do. And you can see by looking at all the resume and all the things that I've participated in, it's been a great run.
Yeah, tell me how. So, I mean, like, you've done a lot with, just some really influential folks. You've had the chance to be a part, and I've had, with my telemedicine company in the past, we get a chance, kind of fortunately, it's weird. Somehow you crack in. I got a chance to really help a really top hip hop client back in my early day, back in 2012. And that just opened the door for like massive opportunity uh, for me, and started a relationship that was, you know, amazing. I got introduced to all these celebrity trainers and all these other things. And then next thing we had guys, it's like, oh, hey, that guy in the movie that got kind of jacked up for we helped him do that. And it's pretty cool thing.
Right.
How did you get into, because I know, like, you've done so much of this where, you were sharing earlier your backstage pass collection and all these kind of things. Like, what was your mindset of getting in and like make being different than every other chiropractor out there? And like, what did you do differently that you think other
Well,
people?
I didn't really want to be a local chiropractor. I want to be the best in the world, and when you have that goal that you want to be the best in the world, then you are trying to put yourself in that environment. So I got lucky enough that Ed Cohen, who is a legend in powerlifting, walked into my office. He was my very first patient, which is like, God has given me a gift, which is
Yeah,
Ed. And Ed broke well, Ed was having some nagging injuries, and I said, "Hey, look, why don't we just put together a preventive program where I go through your body like a fine tooth comb, 3 days a week, and you don't have any pain." Because we had to stack some pretty heavy weights on his body. He was only 5'6",
yeah,
220 pounds at the time, and he
monster.
was already squatting, like say 920. And I went to the Hawaiian National World Championships, and he got under 965 pounds and did a full squat. And I just looked at it and I said, I was about 24. And I said, oh my God, what if the weight just comes crashing down on top of him? I'm in charge of this person that has to break world records every year. And we have to put more weight on this frame. How are we going to do it? So we put together a concept where he would come in 3 days a week, uh, for just I would just look for something,
Hmm.
with my hands up into the tissue and find patterns that were developing and then eliminate them quickly. And he ended up breaking 71 world records and not getting injured the entire time he was a patient of mine. And then, the word got out from the powerlifters that this is Ed Cohen's doctor. When he walks in, look at there's Ed Cohen, there's his doctor. Even in Russia, they wanted to, find out what the secrets were about Ed Cohen. They take the doctor out for a couple of drinks,
Yeah,
hey, what's going on here? So
secret.
I was lucky enough to get that spotlight on me, and then, took advantage of it by, providing the best care and looking for some really good wow moments inspired the head of the American Powerlifting Federation at the time, Ernie France. And he said, look, guy's really happy with your deep tissue treatments and your work on the shoulders and the legs and all. I said we would like you to be the doctor for the APF, and here I am, 25 years old, and I'm the doctor for the American Powerlifting Federation,
Wow.
and traveling to every national world championships in Italy and in Russia, and before Perestroika, I was in Soviet Union, 1989, and I had the opportunity to meet Yuri Veroshansky, and I said to the director of this the sports event, U.S. versus the Russians, it's like
Yeah, yeah.
being the
What was
Iron
that?
Curtain.
Yeah, is it like Rocky 3?
It was like communist times. It
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
people had gray pants and like one shirt, like
Cold
that was
War.
issued by the government. And so what had happened was I said to Ed, I said, let's run a sports medicine course in Russia and let's pick all the best doctors in the world from Russia, then have American doctors and European doctors come and learn. We had around 275 doctors that attended this first course. I was 26 years old, and I'm running a course at the National Institute of Physical Culture and Sports Sciences in Moscow. And the Russians were super happy with me because, obviously they had no access to, US currency because the ruble wasn't even exchanged on the market yet. So we were bringing in, suitcases of cash to the Soviet
Yeah.
sports committee, almost $300,000. So they're like, "Oh, James,
And that was back when what, like, in the late '80s?
89."
Yeah, so, I mean, $300,000 then was a lot more money
Oh
than
yeah, it was a lot.
$300,000
And that
now.
was before Perestroika. So they were like, "Oh, we're going to use this to buy what we need for our athletes," because they needed, the latest technology that wasn't made in Russia. So we were very valuable. So they took very good care of us. Our bodyguards were Sultan Rachmanov, who broke all of Vasily Alexiev's world records. He was my bodyguard that was accompanying me everywhere I went. And also David Rieger, who was pound for pound the strongest man in the world at that time. And I even had an arm wrestling competition with him at the sports hotel where they had the Olympic Games 1980, which of course, we didn't participate in due to Afghanistan, but that's where we stayed when we had these programs. So at a young age, I was right in the thick of it. And I think I did 100 national and world championships as a volunteer, which is where you learn, because if I'm sitting across from a world powerlifting champion, he's got coaches and doctors that are telling him what to do.
Mhm.
And then I ask him questions about it. I give a history. What are you taking and what are your vitamin regime? What's your training program? How's your periodization? How much rest are you doing? And I'm pulling in all this valuable information from all these, track and field world
Incredible
championships from
people, yeah.
Africa and just, learning by, interviewing like you are. And it just became like so soaked with knowledge and wisdom from just all these, champions. And it just really made life a lot easier because, I mean, well, some people have one champion they work with, and that's great. I might have interviewed 1,000 national world champions before I was 30 years old. So that really makes a difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right, and I think there's, a guy like, Tony Robbins does stuff like that when he's focused on a path, whether it's money or business, like all these things, he'll find some of the best in that. And then that's what he does. He goes and interviews them, then writes a book about it to share the information, but also so he can receive the information and then leverage that information for, better outcomes for himself and those around him. And so that's something that I think it's one of the most overlooked, easiest opportunities is people don't like to go out and ask other people who are doing stuff. For me, when I was young and getting into business, every business guy I could come across, I wanted to spend time with to learn from. Same thing today. I will give my time to young, hungry, ambitious people, that I can pour into because I want to do the same because I wanted those people to do the same thing for me. I mean, I'll never forget when I was younger, probably that same age, 25, 26, I'd offer to like drive these rich guys to the airport. Like oh, I got to fly out to Miami or I got to go to LA for something. I'm like, I'll take it. Can I take you to the airport? I'd go pick them up at their house, take them to the airport just so I could get 30, 40 minutes in the car with them to ask
Right.
questions and, like just stuff like that. And I think it's a skill in like almost a heart position that does not exist that much anymore. And it sounds like you had it as a young person of just wanting to learn all this information. And then you can go and turn that into something very, very valuable, which I think is,
Well, what's great about it is I tell them, look, this is a doctor-patient relationship, so anything you tell me is personal and private. So I can ask anything I want. Back then, I was asking questions about what their growth hormone
yeah.
program was before it was illegal, and what testosterone they were taking, and what androgenic or back then there was all kinds of different things going around. But we were able to really dig deep and find out really the details of what everyone was doing. And of course, working with Ed Cohen had advisors like Dr. Squad, Fred Hatfield, and various doctors that he was plugging into. And then he would come to me and he would tell me what he's doing. And obviously we would have to know because we were his doctor. And the same thing with these athletes. When you're a doctor, you can really, the history is a good way of learning from who you're, one of the greatest athletes in the world. You can ask them any question you want. If it has something to do with their actual injury or, what's going on with them, you really can get a lot of information from these people. Highly recommend that if you're a young doctor, I would highly recommend that you volunteer yourself at, like the All African Track and Field Championships and the powerlifting world championships and the US weightlifting championships and even the Olympics. The United States Olympic Committee has a program for doctors to, go through a whole series of, where you become a doctor for the Olympics, but it takes about 4 years to go through that transition. It's absolutely worth it
Well, yeah,
because you
you
learn
get in the
so much.
room. You never know who you're gonna connect with, who you're gonna help, and that person goes on to be the next, Michael Phelps or and you get to be part of. I think you're probably familiar with Tim Grover, and Tim Grover got to work with Michael Jordan. He never even sent a letter to Michael Jordan. He sent a letter to everybody else on the Chicago Bulls, thinking Jordan's probably already got somebody. Jordan ended up being the guy that wanted to work with him, and that led to Kobe and like all these other pretty cool things that he was able to do with Michael Jordan, but and he's willing to do it for free, you know. And then I think there was a part where Michael Jordan's like, "Well, actually, I want to pay you because if I'm paying you, so you can't help anyone else. I want you to only help me," which I thought was which is very interesting. So, you know, as you get all this knowledge in your late 20s, mid or late 20s, what was kind of the next phase that you kind of went into in the career, you know, in that
Well, I
like
got really frustrated with the fact that I would then, like trying to teach and say, okay, phase one, which is relief phase, get them pain free and remove the the tonic protective splinting and guarding reflexes that are compressing their body's spring system, which is, stiffness, you would call it. And so once we got them past that, we set a goal.
and so is it some like a parasympathetic
No,
it's not gr
actually, it's a simple reflex that I can teach anyone. It's if the inflammation is in the tissue, the nerves that actually detect that are called nociceptors, and those are chemical receptors. And they're also in the gut, like if you have too much alcohol or you drink some bleach,
Mhm.
these receptors are going to send a message to the spinal cord first that there's a warning that you're going to die. That's like bottom line. And that life-saving reflex is takes control over you. It's a dominant reflex, so you have no control over it. So the first thing that, like the vomiting reflex is the nausea. So if you're drinking 6 or 7 shots and all of a sudden you have nausea, that's the first sign you say, well, I'm not going to drink anymore. So it shuts that whole thing down right there with the nausea. So you're at 6 drinks. Now let's do the second step. Let's get it out of your body before it kills you. And then, you're like, okay, something is about to occur because my head's spinning and I need to go to the bathroom. That's all reflex. That's not, so when you are vomiting, you're like, I don't want to do this. It doesn't feel good, but you have no choice.
Right.
It's a dominant reflex. So
Hmm.
this whole splinting and guarding reflex is the same. Once that inflammation is detected in a tissue, like in a shoulder, it sends a message to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord actually turns around and it sends a message to the muscles of the surrounding area to contract, to brace the area so you don't move it much so it can heal. Fortunately, those are actual contractions. So once those muscles start contracting to protect the area, they're also going to get, worn out and tired. And they're going to get fatigued and muscle fiber damage. And from there, now you have even more inflammation. So the second wave, from the
So if
first
we
wave is injured tissue.
well,
The
yeah, so
second wave
let's
is,
go to the
the
injury tissue.
second
I wanna
injured tissue.
pause right
And
there.
then this whole thing gets worse,
Yeah,
and
that's
now
what I wanna
you're
ask. I wanna break it down. So, like, I used to think of I used to be a kind of powerlifting, heavy, like a bodybuilder. I'd squat 600 pounds. And what I found is I was at an office job and I sit often now. What I'd find is some of those times it's like almost like I created, is explained to me this way of like creating enough trauma in that area, like in my pelvic area from that amount of weight. And then I go sit and that the muscles would just sort of tighten up, whether it's like a psoas muscle issue that would lead to back pain or some of these things. Like, is that something that you're talking almost like where the area's kind of got a little injury, so now it tightens up to protect it, but that tightening that's protecting it also can leave these other areas vulnerable because it's
right.
not in play?
There's only one thing that controls this entire looping reflex that keeps spiraling completely. Pretty soon, like these really severe thoracic outlet syndromes that are so bad that the shoulder is dragged down into this tunnel where the blood flows in and out. You get blood clots, and then it can release in your lung and kill you. Literally, that's how severe it can get. But limping is caused by this tonic protective reflex. When you have a car accident, you can't move your neck. That's a sample of what that's like. So that is muscles that are contracting. So like Ed Cohen, I would tell him, look, man, if you have these even slight splinting and guarding reflexes from a little bit of inflammation,
Tell me what
that's going to
defines
get in the way of you
splinting.
lifting heavy weights.
Yeah, define like splinting and guarding. Give a little bit of example on that for like people that just are not, don't have a
It's
medical.
like a knot. It's like knots.
Okay.
Or, like your shoulder is stiff, a frozen shoulder,
Yeah.
a stiff
Yeah. Yeah.
neck, or, when you hit your elbow and you can't bend it. Oh, my elbow, I can't bend it.
Yeah.
That's That's done for a reason.
And the
That's so that
body's
you don't.
doing that, like you explained the vomiting type thing. The body's kind of like, yeah, which is it's interesting. I never thought. I mean, I never even thought about that way, and that's it's super interesting and a great analogy. Thank you for explaining it that way.
Well, it's because that's the way it is, and
Yeah.
then here's the thing now when, like if you look at Team Doctors YouTube channel, Team Doctors Academy YouTube channel, you see these cases where these people have had seen 30, 40 doctors. They've had pain for, 15 years. They have 25 different major symptoms from numbness, purple hand, the blood flow's not going through their body. And they just in agony, and they're literally out of pain in a week with this approach that we use,
Wow.
which is simply this. Just, map via, consultation, like a telemedicine consult. First, they fill out a history form, which gives me all their symptoms. And then then we have a pre consultation report that shows me where all this inflammation should be. And then we map it out back and forth. And I tell them, look, I, I think we can get this inflammation out in 5 days. And we set like a, and it may be a day off. And then when they come here, I just do something called inflammation mapping. It's mapping where the inflammation is by probing and using this Vibasage device to put it on the entire tissue. What hurts?
Yeah,
Okay.
you feel it.
Now I
Where's
know
the
how
spot?
big the parking lot is.
Got
You
it.
see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like if you call someone and you say, I need my driveway plowed. Okay, well, how big is your driveway? It's 20 feet by 60 feet. Okay, it'll be $60. How do you know? Because I've done about 3,000 driveways that are
Yeah,
20
right.
foot by 60 feet. And my plow is so big, and I go back and forth, and I know how long it'll take me, and that's how long it's going to be. If you pull up with if you're used to doing 60-foot driveways every day, and you can do 50 a day, if Walmart calls up and says they have a 10-acre parking lot, they want it plowed, you will go over there and say, "Look, I've got all these other customers that I've contracted out to do 60 driveways at, you know, uh, 50 foot by 20,
Yeah.
and I'll give you 50 foot by 20, and then I got to come back, in 2 days and give you another 50 foot by 20." And the guy from Walmart, it's like, "Hey, I need this parking lot done by tomorrow."
Mhm.
So that's the difference between someone who's got a stiff shoulder and severe chronic pain with the inflammation is so insane that it's causing a lower high levels of kynurenine production
Mhm.
that sucks up all the tryptophan out of their bloodstream, and then the serotonin can't be produced because it needs tryptophan. They are diving into depression. The kynurenine levels are so high it turns into quinolinic acid. Their anxiety, it's like a big bright light shining in their brain, and they can't sleep at night.
And then our
Nervous
country's
system is
solution
overreactive,
yeah, our
and
country's
so.
solutions to throw 'em a bunch of Lyrica and antidepressants and all these other drugs to mask those symptoms when really someone like you can likely help all that stuff come undone.
Well, everybody knows in medicine, if you go to PubMed and you put inflammation, depression in the search box, you're going to find, I think, close to 17,000 articles in PubMed that say that inflammation, the pathway is been the same for 15 years, because my research was done in 2012 when Anthony Field from the Wiggles got on ABC, or got on the Today Show in Sydney, Australia, and said, this chiropractor cured my depression. Basically, I mean, he had substantial improvement. And basically I knew from learning from Bill Anton from Australia at a lab out there called Path Labs, that he did a lecture when I was in Indonesia. I was sitting in the front row, and he said, inflammation leads to depression through the IDO pathway. And, hey, Bill, you wanna have lunch? I'll buy you lunch. Give me your PowerPoint. And I dove right into this inflammation concept back in, 22 years ago in 2005. And that has been the key to why I can reverse these chronic pain conditions And also these mood disorders really help the people with the mood disorders because it's all connected to inflammation. And it's equivocal. It's not even arguable. You can't even, if somebody says, like you're wrong, I mean, like they look really bad because they're not up to speed on what the reality is. Because, like I said, anybody can go into PubMed, it's public. That's the NIH database. Every journal on the planet is listed in PubMed. And you could pull article like you could even go inflammation, depression, Harvard University, and there's probably a dozen scientific studies that were done by Harvard. You can plug in any university with that search and find what that university is doing as far as that, the research on the connection between inflammatory chemicals and depression, anxiety, brain fog, hardening of the arteries and cancer, and even you know, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and bipolar syndrome and schizophrenia. So if you have someone in your family that has these disorders, go ahead and go in there and take a look. And you know what? If you don't understand something, go into ChatGTP and say, what does pathophysiological connection mean?
Yeah.
What does this mean? And then you'll be able to figure it out yourself.
Well, I love that. And so, I mean, and over the years of you learning all this and being able to help so many people, I think what I love about, and I see this oftentimes with like great creators, great innovators, people that are just like obsessed with finding a better way, which is kind of my tagline of my life. You've created a like a new product, right? A new medical device, and you share a little bit about that, just because this is new, um, and I believe it aligns with what we're talking about of how you get inflammation
Okay.
and how you heal, right? So share a little bit about what that is and what it does and why you designed it.
Well, 10 years ago, I decided to only treat severe chronic pain cases that no one can fix. So when I do the inflammation mapping, there's a daunting amount of inflammation. It's so severe that, like I said, it causes the depressive syndromes. It causes, when you have your muscles that are tight, case you're tight, your shoulder, a little bit of rotator cuff. These people have such powerful splinting and guarding reflexes that it drags the shoulder into outlets that, don't allow the blood to move in and out of the arm. And that's what I specialize in, thoracic outlet syndromes, which are the worst. Nobody's having luck with them. So what I needed to do after the inflammation mapping is I needed to move that inflammation out of the tissue very fast. So I developed a new tool for that. And what really inspired me was that I was working on this very famous guru from India who, was referred to me by Kevin Trudeau, natural cures expert. He's been a patient of mine for a long time. He said, look, got to help this woman out. I said, okay. So I was applying the deep tissue with my thumb and it just wasn't budging. I was like, what am I going to do? He expects a miracle and I'm not even, this thing isn't budging. So I took this vibrating massager and I put it over my thumb, and all of a sudden, the whole the whole hip socket just let go. And what is that all about? So it was the interface that the nervous system guards you from, noxious stimuli and something that will harm you. So I said, well, the hand is this most, the most comforting and something that the human hand is something that we're comfortable with. We're touched by it. We touch ourselves and the nervous system says it's safe. So I said, why don't I model or do some what we call biomimicry and develop an interface with a low amplitude vibration massage tool that will mimic the texture of a human hand, the skin of a human hand, the elasticity of a human hand, and the flesh underneath the hand. And also, what we need to do is we need to sink it through the skin layer to rest on top of the muscle. So, through research, I determined that skin layer is 30 hardness. That's the hardness on, like if you put a durometer, measure the hardness of the plastics or rubber, and you have something that's hard, that's 90. Gummy bear is 10, and a hard plastic's like 90. A tire is 65, and you can gauge these materials based on this durometer. So we'd found out that skin was the 30 shore
30. So
thirty.
a gummy bear is, I think I like gummy bears. I probably shouldn't, but it made me now I want a gummy bear. But the gummy bear, so you're saying like the squishiness of the gummy bear,
Right.
squishiness.
That's the hardness factor. Like a gummy bear is 10.
Yeah,
That's why it's squishy. So you wouldn't use a gummy bear as an interface because it's too
too
soft.
soft. Right.
Also, what you have to do is use a material that you can actually gauge the exact hardness by mixing synthetic rubber with plastic. And we work with DuPont on this, and DuPont said, look, you can get whatever you want
Hmm.
from
Yeah.
30 to 90, just let us know. And I said, well, also I needed to have good glide because after you drop, lower and lower, softer and softer, you're putting more rubber into the material. So it starts to stick to the skin, rubbery, and it starts to, pull on the hair. And I'm like, oh, we got to a point where we said, I don't know if we can really do this because all the other companies, when we tested their material, it was grabbing the skin. I'm like, that's not a good interface.
Yeah.
So through
Interesting.
DuPont, we got the right mixture and we have it the exact or as close to the humanly possible density of human muscle. Understand? So we can sink through the skin layer and literally lay it on the surface of the muscle. And because the pad surface is the hardness of the muscle and they're the same, the possibility of injury to the muscle is very low because they can't harm each other when they're the same softness.
Hmm.
I don't want to like fight with the guns or anything. You're you jackhammer a hard piece of plastic if I do a drum roll on your shoulder, obviously you're not going to like it. The drumstick is like 90 shore A. The body is naturally through these reflexes, they're called withdrawal reflexes.
Hmm.
So if I hit you with a drumstick, you're like this, that's natural. That's through the spinal cord. Once you do this, when you're trying to get the inflammation out, it's like, forget it. The
Hmm.
muscle is already guarding against it. It's becoming hard, and you can't work the inflammation and lactic acid out of hard, like a hard muscle. Like, how are you going to work the lactic acid and
Yeah.
inflammation out of this
So is it
when I could do
sometimes a
it very
problem with
easily like this? You see
too
what I
hard?
mean?
Yeah, it like is too hard, too fast, sometimes an issue that creates more protection to block the inflammation from getting out?
That's right.
Okay.
And here's an analogy. If you have soap and a sponge, and what you can do is you say, well, soap is like inflammation and the sponge is the muscle. So if I run it underwater and I get the water in there and I squeeze it out, their soap comes out. Then I suck the water back in and then I squeeze it again and more.
Yeah,
Pretty
great.
soon, a
I
few more of those, it's
I love
good.
you.
We set it down. So that's what we do with the muscle. It's similar. It's called rinse and repeat.
It's a
Rinse
beautiful
and repeat.
analogy. I love analogies. I use analogies. I think they're one of the best way to communicate with people, and like what you're talking about, like every doctor should take you should create an analogy course and teach it because here's the deal is, and this is the problem, and I know like you're incredibly smart, but you don't, and I want to pause you because I work with a lot of doctors. I coach a lot of doctors. And one of the biggest challenges most doctors have is their ability to communicate simply what we're doing. And when you talk about that, you're like, hey, the soap, and we squeeze out, the soap comes out, and then we do it again. But like it connects, right? So it's like a 12-year-old kid could understand what you're doing to their body to go, oh, okay, got it, doc, versus using a bunch of stuff that you have to go to medical school to understand. So I want to applaud you for it. Keep doing it. And it sounds like it's something that you do well. I think it's just the greatest way for people to understand it. And then they get it. And guess what? When I understand what you're saying, do I trust you? Yes. And if I trust you, your ability to help me is better. If I don't trust you and I'm scared or I don't want to move forward or like, you know what I mean? Like we just know the psychology of people and our bodies and understanding that trust. So I just want to pause you and applaud you on it.
Thank you very much.
Love your analogies. They're so good. I'm an analogy guy and they're great. And I'm visualizing. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a great way to explain that. Because this is conversations that I have too with other people over my years of physiology and all that kind of stuff. So it's beautiful. So anyway,
Well, my father used to say, as soon as you say one word they don't know, that's it. They're not listening ever again. Because if everything is going to
yeah,
come after that is based on that word, like I'm done. And so I said, well, I got to tone it down. And all of our communication when we're in like AI, open AI, we say, look, what we just said, bring it down to a 12-year-old reading level because I can't exclude all these people that don't know medicine. And what's good is it to them if we don't really get a connection with them? It's
Or
not going to work.
99.99% of people have no clue what you're talking about because they didn't have
Right.
the education you had, but they have the pain and they have the problem. I've always found that the docs that I've helped become the most successful in their practices were the ones that could just dumb down the information. The ones that are like have to I'm like, look, if all your patients went to medical school, okay, cool. You can talk that way and you guys can talk your jive. But most people don't understand it. And when I don't understand something, either A, you made me feel stupid, or I might not trust you, or I might have uncertainty of whether you are the one that can actually help me. But when you're like, oh, the sponge, and you squeeze, totally get it. All right, doc, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's just
Well,
because it's
well,
simple.
also, if you're dealing with people like, my patients haven't, like, I'm not the first person they've seen. I mean, when they contact me, they read my book and they said, what you say in the book makes sense. And then they're gonna, you know, fill out an online form. We haven't exchanged a dollar yet. I put together a, 45-page pre-consultation report, which is sort of the basis of we're gonna flip the page during our video consult for 2 to 3 hours
Wow.
and we're going to go page by page and we're going to use those analogies. So if you have someone who's been, like, hey, go to my guy and you got to go here and then they went to Czechoslovakia and they went to Saudi Arabia for this therapy and it didn't work. It's like just lost hope one after another. I have to be able to really lock them in because I know I can help them. I can get them out of pain. And also, have other doctors. Like I had one patient that, I said, I'll get him walking in about 5 days. And she said, well, we'll get back to you. And then she went to Northwestern Hospital and they said, what do you think of this doctor? And she said, well, if he was anybody, he'd be working here. And so they did not do the treatment. I mean, like, why would you ask that person what's going on? So
Right.
the bottom line is that, you have to make a solid connection with that patient and you have to give them confidence that you can pull them out of this because these are not simple conditions that these people have that I only treat one patient a week and I only treat 4 people a month. And, so, you know, uh, I tell them, look, I do the mapping. I say, this is the size. It's like 12 muscles that are, 5 inches long. I got 60 inches of real estate to go through to move all this inflammation out, to shut that whole reflex off. So this thing goes back to normal, normal tone. Okay. And, when they come in, they expect by the fifth day to have normal tone and the pain gone.
Yeah.
So, that's why when we use the tool, it makes it much faster. But like I said before, I mean, they are always looking at you skeptically. So you really have to know how to communicate with them. Otherwise, they're going to say, no, I can't deal with another doctor.
Yeah.
I've already blown $60,000. The last patient that walked in from Hyannisport, Massachusetts was not rich. She put $200,000 into her treatment protocols since, for the last 45 years, still in pain. She just left here and she said, I'm so thrilled. I'm completely pain free right now. And she teaches kids that are, troubled. And I've had such a great day with my students. They didn't bother me because they're kids with violent tendencies and
Yeah.
was thrilled to have her head like working right. Her brain was like, and she could see better. And she was so thrilled to have that. That's all from moving inflammation out of the body. You
Wild.
got to keep it simple. If you move that inflammation out, you've got so many good things that happen. This, like, okay, your pain is gone, but also since inflammation is directly connected to fatigue and atherosclerosis and brain fog and depression, anxiety, you get all these side benefits.
Hmm.
And also you can tell if something's not going to work, like muscle stim does not move inflammation out. Stretching does not move inflammation out. Exercise does not move massive inflammation out. And adjustments help, but it doesn't move all the inflammation out that twists this whole body into chronic state of pain. So when you look at the treatment, you say, does it move inflammation out? And if it doesn't, forget it. Don't do it, because you're just going to feel better for a little while and then it's going to go right back to the way it was before. You have to move the inflammation out. And if you don't, you're never going to get anywhere with that.
You've created this, you know, I'll call it pad for lack of a better term. I know you'll have a better description of it. That is like a hand going on this device to help move inflammation out. Is that correct? Is that
Right. We call it biomimicry, which is a scientific study of how nature solves problems. And then we look to nature to help us solve problems in medicine or engineering, or how we clean up the oceans, that kind of thing. And you find of all these breakthroughs come from determining, like Velcro. Velcro was from a scientist in Germany that had the cockleburrs stuck to his sweater, and dog had all these spurs all over his
yeah.
fur. So he created one side of fur and the other side was the hooks that these under the microscope, and they lock together. And now you got like something like 2,500 pounds that you can hold together with a Velcro strap. And that was how Velcro was discovered. And also, I don't know if you remember when Phelps was swimming in the beginning, he had a suit on, a swimsuit was made to mimic the shark fins or the shark scales.
Yeah. Skin. Yeah.
He was break all the guys, ladies and guys who were wearing them, that were breaking world records. And they said, look, this is too effective and we have to make it illegal. It was so good. So
Wow.
they were looking at sharks. How come they swim 35 miles an hour with these scales? And they said, let's make a suit, which is scientifically, mimics those scales. So what I did was I determined the metrics of a human hand, the skin texture, the skin elasticity, okay, and how the thickness of the actual flesh of the hand and the muscle underneath it. We have a dual density pad that goes inside there, and we have a skin that mimics literally the human hand. And also the shape of it is the size of the human hand. And it has a bullnose edge, like like the heel of the hand and the fingers that have rounded edges. So it can help to sweep that inflammation, lactic acid, and metabolic waste into the lymphatics with a massage plow, we call it, like
Yeah.
massage plow. We're actually plowing by skimming. We're actually just skimming, like we drop the pad in, it lays on the surface of the muscle because it's the same density as muscle.
Yeah.
It's hard, it's more dense than skin. And it literally lays on the top of the surface of the muscle and skims all, and Viper pumps out the chemicals,
Wow.
and then it skims it off into the lymphatics. And then the rest is just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. If you'd like to see it, I'll show it to you. I've got one right here if you'd like me to show you.
Yeah, you pull it up, and then also what's the best way for, like, how can people find that your pad? Do you have a website, or where can they go?
Well, like we literally just got the pads in last week, so we're revamping the website, but it's teamdoctors.com. The name of the brand is called Team Doctors. I was trying to figure a name for my brand, and then I came across somebody that says, well, what is repeated on your CV? And it was Team Doctor for the
Yeah,
1988 World Championships, Team Doctor for the, African Track and Field Championships. And I said, that would just keep repeating
doctor.
was Team Doctor.
I love.
So I called my brand Team Doctors because that's really what we are. So this is like, don't laugh now, but we have a lot of celebrity clients. So we made a gold plated unit. So it's low amplitude because it doesn't have to be hitting really deep, because you just have to lay it on the surface of the muscle, because the muscle, you put that vibration is really like rinse and repeat with the sponge. Like I had mentioned to you earlier, if we just take the sponge with the soap, squeeze it out, then we're going to suck the interstitial fluid in from the plasma that soaks it again. And then we're going to squeeze it out again, like rinsing out soap from a sponge. So the plasma delivers that clean fluid that has oxygen, nutrients in there, but it can't get in because it's soaking. It's like you have a flood on your grass, like 3 inches of water because of flood. You're trying to get that fertilizer in, but it's floating on the top.
Yeah.
You got to move that flood off, which is the swelling, so that you can actually get that to penetrate in. So you have to do what we call outflow. When you create an outflow, you're vibrating the muscle to pump it out, okay? And then you're skimming off the surface, like I had mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
to move it into the lymphatics, and the pressure moves it into the veins, the two drainage systems of the body. So this pad is this one. We have three different ones. This is we have it red. This one is red inside, so that's to tell you that that's stage one because you're in pain. See,
Yep.
and so then you have another pad, which is the dual density, which is yellow. That's when you have the pain out, and then you have still some systemic inflammation in the tissue. You're not completely void of inflammation. That's the second phase. And then the green one is the more stiffer pad that is when you're ready to go. Like you are an athlete, you're ready to go. So this pad is so soft. It's actually softer than a human hand, but has the texture of human skin that I can put it on my face.
Yeah.
So I'm putting it right on my nose and my eye socket, and it's so comfortable because it's so soft. It feels like somebody's touching me with their hand. And if I want to get the TMJ, I can loop underneath here to get that medial pterygoid. I can vibrate the jaw, and the jaw, all the muscles that attach to the
Totally.
jaw, if I keep it loose, the jaw vibrates the bone, and the muscles that attach to it will actually vibrate, which will, and
The
then we can
headaches,
move that
TMJ.
fluid out.
There's so much stuff with that.
Now, if I leave this on here for 30 seconds, what you're going to see is my entire forehead will be bright red with blood because it's going to flow in here. And really, if I want, I could do a scalp massage, which feels amazing. But you would use this in the first phase when you have pain because soft feels comfortable. Don't put something on me that I'm going to do this to. I don't
Yeah.
like it.
No, you're right.
Doesn't feel good when you're putting something that's hard on my sore muscles. Use this pad first.
Love
And then
that.
once the pain is gone, you go to the second pad, the core pad. This is the relief pad. And then you have the third pad is the performance pad. So now, I mean, just like 20 seconds, I can only feel how warm it is. Now look at that. Look at the difference. I mean, it's 20 seconds. Okay. So
Amazing.
we're obviously, that doesn't take much to learn that you're, getting that warm blood in there and it's moving all that poison out of,
Everything out.
that's how it works. The
Poor
body
blood
works that
flow.
way.
Poor blood flow is such a problem with chronic disease, and so that's amazing. What I want to do is I'll make sure we add all of that information in the show notes for this. This has been like just so awesome to have you as a guest. Amazing information. I could talk to you for 4 hours, at least. I want to thank you, Dr. Stoxen, for being on here, and thank you for what you do and how you help people, and yeah, like your ability to connect and explain how problems get solved is amazing. It's a gift, and I know there's thousands of people that will agree that you have that gift. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being on the 1% Doctor podcast. For our listeners, please like, subscribe, and share, and also check out the show notes. It'll have all the information, contact information for Dr. James Stoxen, so you can learn more. Any last words before we hop off, Doc?
I think that, when people have chronic pain and they go to so many different doctors, I think they should just, look to solving these problems themselves, self-help. You don't have to pay for it, and it's your effort. And if you, like I tell people say, how long should I put that machine on me? Well, do you want to get better fast or slow? Fast. Well, put it on a lot,
Yeah.
And so, like literally when people get a self-help tool, they can put that on them 4 or 5 times a day. Whereas when they go to like I said before, if you have a Walmart parking lot of inflammation and you go to the guy and he shows up with a shovel, you're not getting anywhere with that.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm going to come over like an hour a day and shovel them. Forget it. That's why you're never getting better, because it's not possible to get all that inflammation out with 3 days a week with 15 minutes of purposeful therapy. You need to take matters in your own hands, literally, put that effort you feel is right and work it with that, the ambition of getting out of pain. You put that effort behind it, put as much time as you want with self-help as you can, and solve the problems yourself. And that's the best advice I can give you.
And it's so true. I mean, I've seen it in my life where I've had issues it could be something as simple as foam rolling, right? Where I'm thinking like, I was just kind of thinking, I'm like, why don't I foam roll that? Why don't I go and foam roll that like you said, like, or maybe I do it for 5 minutes one day versus like, why don't you do it 5 times for 10 minutes? It
Right.
just makes more, it's like common sense. And, I consider myself an athlete and somewhat of an expert in the space. And so it's like, and I think there's thousands of people listening that are going to go, yeah, he's right. Like it's common sense. So thank you for the reminder of it. And our bodies, God designed us to heal. Right. And so we can take some of that stuff in our own hands. So I'm grateful for that. So I appreciate you again. Thank you for being an amazing guest here in the 1% Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Adam Lamb. We will see you next time. Welcome to the 1% Doctor podcast. What separates the good from the great, the standard from the extraordinary? It's not just skill, it's not just knowledge, it's mindset, it's execution, and it's the relentless pursuit of growth. And that's exactly what we talk about here on the 1% Doctor podcast. I'm Adam Lamb. I'm your host. Welcome to the show.